Fayetteville is going for two to win the state championship, folks. Rollout pass. He's got a man open. Fayetteville just won the state championship. Fayetteville's won the 7A state championship.
Rivalries. It's one of the biggest contributing factors that makes sports so great. Rivalries add meaning and implications to already crucial games. When you think of rivalries in Arkansas high school football, you think of mainly crosstown rivals. Rivals such as Springdale versus Springdale Harbor, Northside versus Southside, Rogers versus Rogers Heritage, and if you go back far enough, even Fayetteville versus Springdale. But no rivalry can now match the hype, the passion, the respect, or the success of Fayetteville versus Bentonville. Before this rivalry started, Fayetteville played Bentonville pretty much every year. Starting in 1930, the first recorded meeting between these two schools saw Fayetteville shut out their future rivals by a score of 28-0.
The Fayetteville Bulldogs have won the 7A state championship against the 16th ranked team in the nation. According to Maps Preps, Bentonville High School has been defeated after an undefeated season.
The next year they met was in 1931, and the scoreline was the exact same, with the Bulldogs shutting out the Tigers in back-to-back seasons. The meetings between the two schools would be very lopsided for the next few decades. Growing up in the Fayetteville community and around Fayetteville High School, we've always had a sense of how the rivalry is viewed from Fayetteville's perspective, but we never really had an idea of what it was like on the other side. Well, that's what we went to find out when we went to talk to Bentonville head coach Jody Grant. Coach Grant was a defensive coordinator for Bentonville for several years before taking over after the legendary head coach Barry Lunny retired.
Well, I think the rivalry is important for both programs in a sense that it's usually for a title, whether it be a conference title or a state title. You know, I can think we have been in Bentonville, we've been in the state championship game the last 5 years. 4 of those have been against Fayetteville. And that speaks volumes for both programs in the rivalry. You think back, we've played week 10 for the last several years, and then you turn around and we've played in the state championship game. So we're playing each other twice a year within about a 4-week period. And you know, each year they've been very, very competitive. There's been years where we've beaten Fayetteville handily in week 10, and then they turn around and beat us in the state championship game. Last year's a good example. We beat Fayetteville week 10 out here by a significant margin, and then we're playing 4 full quarters last year and having to have a pick off a ball late to seal a championship. So I think you can kind of throw records and throw previous matches out the window when these two teams play, and each time it's really a pretty amazing game.
If you need insight on this rivalry, one of the best sources is Fayetteville principal Dr. Chad Scott. Dr. Scott is in his first year at FHS, but previously spent several years in the same position at Bentonville High School. Dr. Scott talks to us about his time at Bentonville and learning what the rivalry means to both schools.
So what I learned as being part of that community as assistant principal and principal there was a great amount of pride in everything that they do. And obviously a lot of competitiveness. You know, there's a very, very, very high standard for excellence, and winning is what everyone expects. So that is unique about that community. And obviously they've done a really good job at that school, and in sports specifically, on sports rivalries, and teams that everyone else dislikes, Bentonville's up there because, you know, when people are successful, it doesn't matter what, you know, in the world. If you watch the news, national news, you know, people that are at the top, people like to take shots at whoever's on top.
Springdale head coach Zach Clark is in his first year as the leader of the Springdale Bulldogs. But before that, he played for Fayetteville as the quarterback and was also the offensive coordinator for many years later. Coach Clark tells us about how he feels the rivalry really started.
For me, it was, you know, 2010 was my first year. They had kind of had things rolling, and we took them at their place. It was the first conference game of the season, and we took them into overtime. Bentonville ended up winning the game, but it was the first time that you just kind of sense it in the locker room afterwards that, hey, we're as good as they are.
Because of how close the two schools were to each other, Fayetteville and Springdale used to be huge rivals. Every year would be competitive in every sport. But when Springdale split into two schools, that changed the rivalry and it effectively ended it. Dr. Scott says that the rivalry between Bentonville and Fayetteville has gained attention because of how competitive the two schools are in every sport that they play.
Yeah, I think rivalries in general take on different flavors, if you will. Some of them are really based on tradition, or maybe geographic proximity. For example, Fayetteville used to, I think, really in Fayetteville and Springdale was the big rivalry for years. But then the rivalry that's taking on in most recent years is Fayetteville and Bentonville, and I think that rivalry has come out of more competitiveness. Because those two schools, everyone knows, everyone in the state knows, most sports, most activities, it's going to come down to Fayetteville and Bentonville, right? So that rivalry is born out of not so much tradition as it has just the elite level that the students compete at in so many things. And so that, it's pretty recent that rivalry's been what I would say really hot, where people really get worked up about it.
With his experience at Fayetteville High, Coach Clark has countless memories from the rivalry, some good and some bad. He shares a few of those with us.
Probably the proudest thing, and it's a low when in 11, and then last year they mercy ruled Fayetteville. They mercy ruled us in the regular season, and the games weren't competitive, weren't close, and then both years we were able to see them again in the playoffs and play them much better. And just that, I'll always remember that feeling of, hey, how bad it was, and you get mercy ruled, and everybody's down and wondering, hey, are we any good at all when you get, mercy ruled? And then to come back, especially last year, 4 or 5 weeks later, and play them in a state championship game and play them to where that game could go either way.
Being at both schools, Dr. Scott has experienced countless memories of this rivalry, and while it's hard to narrow it down to just 2 moments in this historic rivalry, he tells us about his favorite ones.
The 2-point conversion down in Little Rock for the state title, if you're on the Bentonville side of that, it was crushing. That was a game, and I don't remember the year. You'd have to look that up. I don't remember the year, but fairly recently, Bentonville had that game. Fayetteville scores at the end, scores a 2-point conversion to win it. It was crushing for everyone on the Bentonville side. On the other hand, last year's game, state final, football in Little Rock, Fayetteville scoring there, and Bentonville just having, I think it was about 1:20 something on the clock. Maybe there's a little more than that, I can't recall exactly. Bentonville methodically driving down the field there at the end to win it with a few seconds left.
The public has a perception that with the new high school being added, the split will effectively end the Fayetteville-Bentonville rivalry. But when asked, Dr. Scott seemed to think differently.
I get asked a lot, how's that really going to impact Bentonville in terms of athletics especially? And I'll say this, one thing that people don't really understand is they see what's going to happen in Bentonville as a split, which would mean most people would think, well, that means they're going to split the students in half. But that's really not what's going to take place there. It's actually more of about 65% stay at Bentonville and 35% go to Bentonville West. But I still think the Bentonville-Fayetteville rivalry will continue because I think that's where the real competitiveness will be. I think Fayetteville, obviously, our coaches and our programs are going to continue to get better. With us adding 9th grade on our campus, I think that even makes us stronger, and that's going to allow us to get even stronger with our programs. And Bentonville is going to continue to be strong in their programs because they will have the numbers and they have good people there.
While Dr. Scott doesn't believe that the rivalry changes very much after the Bentonville split, Coach Clark believes the rivalry changes very dramatically after the season is over.
I think part of the rivalry grew because Fayetteville and Bentonville were the last teams with one school towns. And I think, the rivalry, certainly up in Bentonville, it's going to become a Bentonville High, Bentonville West rivalry game. But I think as long as you've got, 2 top programs and 2 of the top programs in the conference, it will always be a rivalry game.
They will never stop playing each other, and they'll never stop respecting each other. And we know that we can always look forward to a cold fall night in Week 10 to give us one heck of a game. While this chapter is over, a new one is about to begin. Fayetteville and Bentonville are just getting started.
you.